My name is Serafina. I am 28 years old, and last Christmas dinner changed everything I thought I knew about family loyalty. When my older brother Marcus smugly announced it was time for me to move out of what I believed was our family home, I felt my world crumble. Little did he know that tucked away in my purse was a property deed that would shatter his arrogant assumptions and expose a web of lies our parents had been spinning for decades. Before we dive into this family revenge story that will leave you questioning everything about blood ties and inheritance, let me ask you something. Where are you watching this from? Are you cozy at home, maybe dealing with your own family drama? Hit that like button if you have ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted completely. And do not forget to subscribe, because this tale of Christmas karma is going to take some wild turns that you absolutely will not see coming. Growing up, I always felt like the odd one out in my family. My parents, Helen and Robert, seemed to shower all their attention on Marcus, who was 3 years older than me. He was the golden child, quarterback in high school business degree from a prestigious university and their obvious favorite. Meanwhile, I was the artsy daughter who chose graphic design over law school, much to their visible disappointment. After college, I moved back into our childhood home to help care for our aging parents while Marcus lived in his downtown apartment, visiting only on holidays and special occasions. For 6 years, I had been the one managing their medications, driving them to doctor appointments, and handling the daily responsibilities of their care. When Dad passed away 2 years ago from a sudden heart attack, I naturally stepped up even more to support Mom through her grief. Marcus barely showed up for the funeral arrangements, claiming his demanding job at the investment firm kept him too busy. Yet somehow he always found time to comment on how I was freeloading off our parents whenever he did visit. The criticism stung, especially since I was contributing to household expenses while also sacrificing potential career opportunities to stay close to home. Last spring, when Mom was diagnosed with early-stage dementia, I became her primary caregiver. The diagnosis was devastating, but I was determined to ensure she received the best possible care in the comfort of her own home. Marcus visited maybe once a month, staying just long enough to ask intrusive questions about Mom's condition and our financial situation. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was a crisp October morning when Mom's longtime attorney, Mr. Patterson, contacted me with urgent news. Mom had forgotten about a scheduled appointment to review her estate planning documents, and he was concerned about her mental capacity to make important decisions. He asked if I could bring her in that afternoon. During the meeting, Mr. Patterson pulled out a thick folder and began explaining Mom's assets. That was when I learned the shocking truth about our family home. The property had never belonged to my parents at all. My maternal grandmother, whom I barely remembered, had purchased the house in 1972 and willed it directly to me when she passed away in 1995, when I was just a baby. My parents had been living in my house for nearly 30 years, maintaining the illusion that they owned it. The monthly mortgage payments I thought they were making were actually property taxes and maintenance costs. All those years of Marcus treating me like a burden, all those snide comments about me mooching off our parents, and all those times I felt guilty about not contributing enough. It was all based on a fundamental lie. Mr. Patterson explained that my grandmother had been worried about my mother's spending habits and wanted to ensure I would always have a secure place to live. The arrangement was supposed to be temporary, just until my parents could afford their own home, but somehow it had stretched on for decades. My parents had promised to tell me the truth when I turned 25, but that conversation never happened. The attorney handed me the original deed, property tax records, and documentation proving my legal ownership. My hands trembled as I read my name on documents dating back over 2 decades. I felt a mixture of vindication and betrayal that left me physically nauseous. How could my own parents lie to me for so long? How could they allow Marcus to belittle me when they knew the truth about who actually owned the roof over our heads? Mom sat quietly during the entire meeting, occasionally nodding, but clearly struggling to follow the complex legal discussion. When we got home, I gently asked her about the arrangement with Grandma. Her eyes grew distant, and she admitted that she and Dad had always planned to buy their own place but never managed to save enough money. She seemed genuinely remorseful, saying they had kept quiet to protect my feelings and avoid family conflict. That evening I locked myself in my room and studied every document Mr. Patterson had given me. The evidence was undeniable. I owned the house outright with no mortgage or liens against the property. The monthly payments my parents had been making were essentially rent to me, though they had never framed it that way. I felt angry, confused, and strangely empowered all at the same time. Over the following weeks, I wrestled with this newfound knowledge. Part of me wanted to confront Marcus immediately and watch his arrogant facade crumble. Another part of me worried about the impact on Mom's fragile mental state. I decided to keep the information private until I could figure out the best way to handle the situation. Marcus continued his monthly visits, each one filled with passive-aggressive comments about my living situation. He would make jokes about me being a permanent house guest and suggest that I needed to get my act together and find my own place. Every comment felt like a dagger, especially now that I knew the truth about who was actually providing housing for whom. The breaking point came in early December, when Marcus announced he was bringing his new girlfriend Victoria to Christmas dinner. He called specifically to remind me to be on my best behavior and not embarrass the family with my bohemian lifestyle. The condescension in his voice was unbearable, but I bit my tongue and agreed to make the holiday special for everyone. As Christmas approached, I found myself carrying the property deed in my purse like a talisman. I was not sure when or how I would reveal the truth, but I knew the time was coming. Marcus's arrogance had reached a breaking point, and I was tired of being treated like a charity case in my own home. The stage was set for a Christmas dinner that would expose years of lies and finally put Marcus in his place. After discovering the truth about the house, I spent weeks observing my family dynamics with new eyes. Every interaction felt different now that I understood the real power structure. I watched Marcus swagger through my front door like he owned the place, commenting on furniture arrangements and suggesting improvements Mom should make to her property. The irony was almost laughable, but I was not laughing anymore. I began documenting everything. Every condescending comment Marcus made, every time he questioned my contributions to the household, every moment he treated me like an unwelcome guest in my own home. I kept a detailed journal, recording dates, times, and exact quotes. My years as a graphic designer had taught me the importance of building a strong case with visual evidence and clear documentation. During one particularly infuriating visit in early December, Marcus brought up the topic of Mom's care again. He suggested that maybe it was time to look into more professional arrangements for her dementia, implying that I was not qualified to handle her needs. When I explained that I had researched local care options and found that in-home care was both more affordable and better for Mom's emotional well-being, he dismissed my findings entirely. "Serafina, you mean well, but you do not have the business background to understand these financial decisions," he said, using that patronizing tone that made my blood boil. "Maybe it is time for the adults in the family to take over the important choices." That comment crystallized something inside me. Marcus viewed me as a child who needed to be managed, not as a grown woman who had been shouldering adult responsibilities for years. He saw himself as the natural heir to family authority, the one destined to make decisions about property and care arrangements. His entire worldview was built on assumptions that were fundamentally wrong. I started researching property law and inheritance rights, wanting to understand every aspect of my legal position. I learned about adverse possession tenant rights and property ownership documentation. I consulted with a different attorney, wanting a second opinion about my rights and responsibilities as the homeowner. Everything confirmed what Mr. Patterson had told me. I was the legal owner, and I had been for my entire adult life. The more I learned, the more strategic I became in my approach. I realized that simply revealing the truth would not be enough. Marcus needed to experience the same powerlessness and humiliation he had subjected me to for years. I wanted him to feel what it was like to have his assumptions shattered and his authority questioned. I began making subtle changes around the house, asserting my ownership in small ways that Marcus would not immediately notice. I replaced the old mailbox with one that clearly displayed my name. I updated the homeowner's insurance policy to reflect my status as the owner. I had the locks changed ostensibly for security reasons, but really to establish my control over access to the property. When Marcus asked about these changes during his December visit, I gave vague explanations about maintenance and security upgrades. He seemed mildly irritated that I was making decisions without consulting him, but he did not press the issue. His casual dismissal of my agency only strengthened my resolve to teach him a lesson he would never forget. I also started reaching out to extended family members, particularly my Aunt Margaret, Mom's sister, who lived across the country. During a long phone conversation, I casually mentioned my discovery about the house ownership. Aunt Margaret was not surprised at all. "Oh, honey, your grandmother talked about that arrangement all the time before she passed," Margaret said. "She was so worried about your mother's financial management and wanted to make sure you would always have security. She made me promise to tell you the truth if your parents never did." This conversation revealed another layer of family deception. Multiple relatives had known about my ownership for years but had remained silent out of respect for my parents' wishes. I felt betrayed by the entire family conspiracy, but I also felt validated in my decision to expose the truth. Margaret shared stories about my grandmother that I had never heard before. Grandma had been a shrewd businesswoman who owned several rental properties and had strong opinions about financial responsibility. She had specifically structured her will to protect me from what she saw as my parents' poor money management habits. "Your grandmother always said that Marcus would be fine because he was ambitious and career-focused, but she worried about your artistic temperament making you vulnerable to financial exploitation," Margaret explained. "She wanted to make sure you had a foundation that nobody could take away from you." These revelations transformed my understanding of family history and my place within it. I was not the irresponsible artistic daughter who needed to be managed and controlled. I was the granddaughter who had been specifically chosen and protected by a wise woman who understood family dynamics better than I had ever realized. I spent the weeks leading up to Christmas, planning my revelation carefully. I knew that Marcus would likely bring up my living situation again, especially with his new girlfriend present. He always performed his authority more dramatically when he had an audience. I wanted to be ready with documentation, legal backing, and the perfect moment to expose his ignorance. I also prepared for the emotional aftermath. Mom's dementia made her vulnerable to stress and confusion, so I needed to handle the revelation in a way that would not traumatize her. I planned to speak with her privately before Christmas dinner, explaining the situation gently, and getting her blessing to set the record straight with Marcus. The night before Christmas Eve, I sat in my bedroom in my house, and reviewed all my documentation one final time. The property deed, the legal opinions, the insurance documents, and the detailed journal of Marcus's condescending behavior. I felt like a prosecutor preparing for the most important case of her career. Tomorrow would be the day that Marcus learned the difference between assumption and reality. Tomorrow would be the day that our family's power dynamic shifted permanently. Tomorrow would be Christmas dinner, and I was going to give my brother a gift he would never forget: the truth about who really held the power in our family. Christmas Eve arrived with the kind of crisp winter air that made everything feel sharp and electric. I woke up early, my stomach churning with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. Today was the day I would finally confront Marcus, but first I needed to have a crucial conversation with Mom. I found her in the kitchen wearing her favorite red sweater and humming Christmas carols while she sorted through old family photos. Her dementia came in waves. Some days she was completely lucid, while others left her confused and disoriented. Fortunately, this morning seemed to be one of her clearer days. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something important," I said, sitting down beside her at the kitchen table. "It is about the house and what Grandma intended when she left it to me." Mom's hands stilled on the photographs, and I saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes. She had been dreading this conversation for years, but deep down she knew it was inevitable. "Mr. Patterson told you about the deed," she said quietly. It was not a question. I nodded and pulled out the legal documents, spreading them gently on the table between us. "Why did not you and Dad ever tell me the truth?" Why did you let Marcus treat me like I was freeloading when I actually own this house? Mom's eyes filled with tears as she touched the edge of the property deed. Your father and I were ashamed, sweetheart. We never intended for the arrangement to last so long. We kept thinking we would buy our own place and then we could tell you the truth without it seeming like we had taken advantage of your inheritance. She went on to explain how the years had slipped by, how other expenses always seemed to take priority over saving for a house, and how the lie had grown larger and more complicated over time. Dad had been particularly worried about how Marcus would react to learning that his younger sister owned the family home. Your brother has always been so proud, so certain that he was destined to inherit everything, Mom said. Robert thought it would crush his ego to learn that his little sister already owned the most valuable family asset. I felt a surge of anger at this admission. My parents had prioritized Marcus's feelings over my right to know about my own property. They had allowed me to be diminished and dismissed to protect his fragile masculine pride. But it is not fair to me, Mom, I said firmly but gently. I have spent years feeling guilty about living here. Years listening to Marcus make me feel like a burden. I have made career sacrifices to take care of you and Dad, thinking I owed you something when actually you were living in my house. Mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You are absolutely right, and I am so sorry. Your grandmother would be furious if she knew how we handled this. She specifically wanted you to know your worth and never let anyone make you feel powerless. We spent the next hour going through old photo albums with Mom, sharing more stories about my grandmother's business acumen and her concerns about family dynamics. I learned that Grandma had actually tried to convince my parents to tell me the truth multiple times before her death, but they had always promised to handle it when Serafina was older and could understand. Your grandmother used to say that knowledge is power, and she wanted you to have both, Mom recalled. She worried that Marcus would always overshadow you if you did not have some independent foundation to stand on. By the time we finished talking, Mom was fully supportive of my plan to reveal the truth to Marcus. She agreed that his behavior had become unacceptable and that it was time for him to understand the real family dynamics. We decided that I would handle the confrontation, but she would back me up if needed. Around noon, my Aunt Margaret called to check in on our Christmas preparations. I had told her about my plan during our previous conversation, and she wanted to offer moral support. When I put her on speakerphone, she and Mom had a long conversation about family history that revealed even more details about Grandma's intentions. Your grandmother specifically told me that if Marcus ever got too big for his britches, I should remind him that Serafina was the real property owner in the family, Margaret said with a laugh. She predicted this exact scenario, Marcus acting like the king of the castle, while his little sister actually held the deed. Margaret also revealed that several other family members knew the truth, including our cousin David and Uncle Paul. They had all been waiting for years for my parents to come clean, growing increasingly uncomfortable with the deception, as Marcus became more arrogant and dismissive toward me. We have all been rooting for you, honey, Margaret said. Every family gathering where Marcus talks down to you, we just look at each other and think, if he only knew. Your grandmother would be so proud to see you finally standing up for yourself. This conversation gave me the final boost of confidence I needed. I was not alone in this confrontation. I had the support of family members who had been silently witnessing Marcus's behavior for years. They were all ready to see him taken down a few notches. As evening approached, I carefully selected my outfit for Christmas dinner. I chose an elegant navy dress that made me feel powerful and professional, paired with the pearl necklace that had belonged to my grandmother. I wanted to look like someone who owned property and commanded respect, not like the struggling artist Marcus always painted me to be. I placed the property deed in a manila envelope along with copies of the other relevant documents. I practiced my speech in the mirror, working on keeping my voice calm and authoritative. I wanted to deliver the truth with dignity and strength, not with petty vindictiveness. Around 5 in the evening, Marcus arrived with Victoria, his new girlfriend. She was exactly what I expected. Perfectly styled blonde hair, designer clothes, and the kind of confident demeanor that suggested she was accustomed to luxury. Marcus clearly wanted to impress her with his family's estate, and his role as the presumptive head of household. "Serafina, this is Victoria," Marcus said with his usual condescending smile. "Victoria, this is my little sister who has been staying with Mom to help out around the house." The way he introduced me, as someone who was staying rather than living in my own home, made my jaw clench. But I smiled politely and shook Victoria's hand, mentally noting this as yet another example of Marcus's distorted view of our family dynamics. During cocktail hour, I watched Marcus play the gracious host, offering drinks and giving Victoria a tour of the family home. He pointed out architectural features and family heirlooms as if he was the curator of a personal museum. The irony was almost overwhelming, but I maintained my composure. Victoria seemed genuinely impressed by the house and made several comments about Marcus's wonderful family property. Each comment felt like another nail in the coffin of Marcus's credibility. When dinner was served, I knew the moment of truth was rapidly approaching. As we gathered around the dining room table, I felt the envelope containing the property deed burning like fire in my hands. Everything was in place: the documentation, the family support, and Marcus's own arrogant behavior, providing the perfect setup for his comeuppance. The only question now was exactly how and when to deliver the revelation that would change our family forever. Now I need to know, are you ready for the explosive confrontation that is about to unfold? Because what happens next at our Christmas dinner table will leave you absolutely stunned at the level of family drama that was about to explode. Dinner started pleasantly enough, with Mom serving her famous honey-glazed ham and all the traditional Christmas sides. Victoria complimented everything enthusiastically, clearly trying to make a good impression on what she believed was Marcus's family. The conversation flowed easily through topics like holiday traditions, Victoria's career in marketing, and Marcus's recent promotion at the investment firm. I bided my time participating in the small talk while mentally rehearsing my moment of truth. The manila envelope sat discreetly beside my chair, waiting for the perfect opportunity. I knew Marcus well enough to predict that his arrogance would eventually surface, especially with Victoria there to witness his supposed authority over family matters. About halfway through dinner, the conversation shifted toward future plans. Victoria mentioned how much she loved the house and asked about its history. This was exactly the opening Marcus had been waiting for. "Well, this house has been in our family for decades," Marcus said, puffing up with pride. "Dad bought it back in the 70s, and now that he has passed, Mom and I are the ones managing the property. It is quite valuable, actually, probably worth close to $800,000 in today's market." I nearly choked on my wine at his casual appropriation of ownership, but I kept my expression neutral. Mom shifted uncomfortably in her seat, clearly recognizing that Marcus was digging himself into a very deep hole. Victoria nodded appreciatively. "It is such a beautiful family legacy. You are so lucky to have this kind of generational wealth to build on." "Exactly," Marcus continued, warming to his favorite topic. "That is why it is so important to make smart decisions about family assets. Speaking of which, Serafina, I have been thinking about our conversation from last month." "Here it comes," I thought, my pulse quickening. Marcus set down his fork and assumed his most serious expression. "Victoria and I have been discussing our future together, and we are thinking about moving in together sometime next year. This house is really too big for just Mom and you, and frankly I think it would be better for everyone if you started looking for your own place." The audacity took my breath away. He was essentially evicting me from my own property while his girlfriend watched approvingly. "I know change is hard," Marcus continued patronizingly, "but you are 28 years old. It is time to move out of the family home and build your own life. I can help you find a nice apartment somewhere, maybe closer to your graphic design clients." Victoria nodded supportively. "Marcus has told me how much you have helped with your mother's care, but he is right that you need your independence. Plus, if Marcus and I do end up living here, eventually it would be awkward for everyone." The presumption was staggering. Not only was Marcus planning to kick me out of my own house, but he was already discussing moving his girlfriend into it. The entitlement was so complete, so absolute, that I almost admired its breathtaking audacity. Mom looked mortified, clearly wanting to intervene but uncertain how to handle the situation. This was my moment. That is interesting, Marcus, I said calmly, reaching for the manila envelope. Before we discuss my living arrangements, maybe we should clarify something about the ownership of this house. Marcus frowned, clearly irritated that I was not immediately agreeing to his eviction plan. What do you mean? This is the family home. Mom inherited it when Dad died, and eventually it will pass to me as the eldest child. That is how inheritance works, Serafina. Actually, that is not how inheritance works in this case, I said, pulling out the property deed and placing it on the table. This house does not belong to Mom, and it certainly does not belong to you. It belongs to me. It has belonged to me since I was 3 years old. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stared at the document as if it were written in a foreign language, while Victoria looked confused by the sudden tension in the room. What are you talking about? Marcus said, his voice rising. That is ridiculous. You do not own anything. You have been living here rent-free for years. I unfolded the deed and turned it so everyone could see the official documentation. This is the property deed for this house, Marcus. It shows that our grandmother purchased this property in 1972 and willed it directly to me when she died in 1995. Mom and Dad have been living in my house for the past 30 years, not the other way around. Marcus grabbed the document, his face flushing red as he read the legal text. This has to be some kind of mistake. There is no way you own this house. You were just a baby when Grandma died. Babies can inherit property, Marcus, I said evenly. Grandma was very specific about her intentions. She wanted to make sure I would always have financial security regardless of what happened with the rest of the family. Victoria looked back and forth between us, clearly realizing that she had walked into a massive family drama. Mom finally found her voice and confirmed what I was saying. It is true, Marcus, she said quietly. Your father and I should have told both of you years ago. Serafina legally owns this house. We have been living here by her grace, not the other way around. The color drained from Marcus's face as the implications hit him. Every condescending comment about my living situation, every demand that I contribute more financially, every assumption about his inheritance rights, all of it was built on a fundamental misunderstanding of who actually held the power in our family. But I am the eldest son, he stammered, as if that legal concept could somehow override written documentation. Sons inherit family property. That is how it has always worked. Not in this family, I replied firmly. Grandma believed in protecting the people who needed protection, not automatically rewarding the people who already had advantages. She saw something in you that made her think you would be fine on your own, but she worried about me needing security. Marcus turned on Mom with fury. How could you not tell me this? How could you let me believe that I would inherit this house? Do you have any idea how this affects my financial planning? Your financial planning? I interrupted, my own anger finally surfacing. For 6 years I have been taking care of our parents while you visited once a month and criticized my contributions. I have sacrificed career opportunities and personal relationships to be here, and you have spent that entire time treating me like a burden in my own house. The truth was finally out, and the power dynamic had shifted completely. Marcus sat stunned, holding a property deed that proved his little sister owned the most valuable asset he had always assumed would be his inheritance. The explosion that followed my revelation was everything I had anticipated and more. Marcus went through what could only be described as the 5 stages of grief in real time, cycling rapidly between denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and a twisted form of acceptance that involved blaming everyone but himself. This is insane, he said, standing up so abruptly that his chair nearly tipped over. There has to be some legal loophole here. Grandma probably was not mentally competent when she made this decision. I am going to contest this whole thing. I remained seated, my voice calm and steady. Feel free to contest it, Marcus. I have already consulted with 2 different attorneys, and they both confirmed that the inheritance is ironclad. Grandma was completely competent when she drafted her will, and she had multiple witnesses. The property has been legally mine for over 25 years. Victoria cleared her throat awkwardly. Maybe I should go wait in the car while you all work this out. No, please stay, I said with a smile that probably looked more predatory than polite. I think it is important for you to understand the real family dynamics here. Marcus has been telling you about his family property and his inheritance rights, but as you can see, the reality is quite different. Marcus's face went from red to purple. Serafina, you are embarrassing me in front of my girlfriend with this ridiculous power play. Even if that deed is legitimate, you know that I am the one with the business sense to manage family assets. You should sign the property over to me so it can be handled properly. The audacity was breathtaking. Even faced with legal documentation proving his irrelevance to property ownership, Marcus still believed he deserved to control my inheritance. Why would I sign over my house to someone who just spent dinner planning to evict me from it? I asked. You literally just told me to start looking for an apartment so you could move your girlfriend into my property. You were planning to kick the actual owner out of her own house. Mom finally found her courage and spoke up more forcefully. Marcus, your behavior toward your sister has been shameful. She has been nothing but generous and caring, and you have treated her like an unwelcome guest in her own home. Generous Marcus turned his fury on Mom. She has been living here rent-free for years. She should be paying me market rate for the privilege of staying in family property. Actually, I said, pulling out additional documents if we want to talk about market rates. I have been subsidizing your mother's living expenses for years, without realizing it. The property taxes alone are $12,000 annually, and I have been covering utilities, maintenance, and household expenses. If anyone owes back rent, it is Mom who owes me. This was not entirely true. I would never charge Mom rent, but I wanted Marcus to understand the financial reality of the situation. The mathematical impossibility of his position was becoming clearer with each passing moment. Victoria was staring at Marcus with a look of dawning comprehension and embarrassment. Marcus, you told me this was your family's house and that you would inherit it. You said your sister was financially dependent on your family's generosity. She is financially dependent, Marcus insisted, but his voice was becoming shrill with desperation. Look at her career choice. Graphic design. She barely makes enough to support herself. I laughed, a sound with very little humor in it. My graphic design business cleared $90,000 last year, Marcus. I have been working from home so I could take care of Mom, not because I cannot afford my own place. I could afford to buy your downtown apartment twice over. This revelation seemed to hit Victoria particularly hard. She had clearly been evaluating Marcus, partly based on his family's apparent wealth and his role as heir to valuable property. Learning that his inheritance was actually his sister's asset while he paid downtown rent prices was not the financial picture she had been sold. Marcus made one last desperate attempt to regain control of the narrative. Even if you technically own this house, I am still the head of this family. I am the eldest son, and that means something. You cannot just throw around some old paperwork and expect to overturn decades of family tradition. What tradition would that be? I asked. The tradition of lying to me about my own inheritance. The tradition of making me feel guilty for living in my own house. The tradition of planning my eviction while I take care of our mother. Mom stood up shakily, clearly done with the entire confrontation. There is no tradition of disrespecting family members who have sacrificed for others, Marcus. Your grandmother left that house to Serafina because she knew your sister would use it responsibly and care for the people who needed care. She was right. Marcus looked around the table, desperately realizing that his entire worldview was crumbling in real time. His authority was imaginary, his inheritance was non-existent, and his girlfriend was watching him reveal himself as entitled and delusional. This is not over, he said, grabbing his coat. I am going to get legal advice about this whole situation. There has to be some way to challenge this. Good luck with that, I said calmly. Make sure you mention to your attorney that you have been living under the assumption that you owned property that has never belonged to you. Also mention that you attempted to evict the actual owner from her own home. I am sure they will find that very interesting. Victoria stood up as well, clearly ready to escape the family meltdown. Marcus, maybe we should talk about this privately later. But Marcus was too far gone to read social cues. Victoria, you have to understand that this changes nothing between us. So what if my sister technically owns this house? I still have my career and my apartment and my inheritance from Dad's life insurance. We can still build our life together." Victoria's expression suggested that this revelation had changed quite a lot, actually. She had been dating someone she believed was heir to substantial family wealth, only to discover he was actually the family member who owned nothing, while his supposedly dependent sister held all the property assets. As they gathered their things to leave, Marcus made one final threat. "Do not think this gives you some kind of power over me, Serafina. I am still your older brother, and I will not be disrespected in my own family." "In your own family, yes," I agreed, "but not in my own house." The weeks following Christmas dinner brought a cascade of consequences that I had not fully anticipated, but thoroughly enjoyed watching unfold. Marcus's relationship with Victoria collapsed within days of our family revelation. She had apparently been under the impression that she was dating someone from a wealthy family with significant inherited assets, and learning that Marcus was actually the financially dependent family member while I owned prime real estate, completely shattered her perception of him. According to mutual friends, their breakup was spectacular. Victoria had apparently been bragging to her social circle about Marcus's family estate and his position as heir to valuable property. Having to explain that she had been completely wrong about his financial status was a humiliation she could not forgive. Marcus tried to convince her that his career prospects were still excellent, but the damage to his credibility was irreversible. The legal consultation Marcus threatened never materialized, probably because any competent attorney would have told him exactly what mine had already confirmed. His case was non-existent. Property deeds are not suggestions or guidelines, they are legal facts. No amount of masculine primogeniture tradition could override documented inheritance law. More importantly, the family dynamics shifted in ways that felt like finally exhaling after holding my breath for decades. Mom and I developed a new relationship based on honesty and mutual respect rather than guilt and obligation. She began sharing more stories about my grandmother, painting a picture of a woman who had been far more strategic and protective than I had ever realized. "Your grandmother used to say that the people who need power the least are often the ones who grab for it most aggressively," Mom told me one evening as we looked through old photo albums. "She wanted to make sure you had real security, not just the illusion of family protection." I also reconnected with extended family members who had been quietly rooting for me for years. Aunt Margaret visited for New Year's and brought boxes of letters and documents that my grandmother had left specifically for me. Reading her thoughts about family dynamics and financial independence felt like receiving wisdom from beyond the grave. One letter particularly resonated with me. "Serafina will face pressure to be smaller than she is, to accept less than she deserves, and to prioritize other people's comfort over her own truth. The house is not just shelter. It is a foundation for her to stand on when she decides to stop apologizing for taking up space in the world." My graphic design business flourished once I stopped feeling guilty about working from home. I converted the basement into a proper studio and began taking on larger corporate clients. The financial security of owning my home outright gave me the confidence to raise my rates and be more selective about projects. Within 6 months, I was earning more than Marcus made at his investment firm, a fact that I did not mention but secretly savored. Marcus and I established a new relationship dynamic that involved much less contact and much more honesty. He still visited Mom occasionally, but his visits were shorter and less presumptuous. He no longer made comments about my living situation or offered unsolicited advice about my life choices. The balance of power had shifted so completely that he seemed almost afraid to challenge me on anything. The most surprising development was how much our mother's mental health improved once the family secrets were finally out in the open. The stress of maintaining lies and managing conflicting family dynamics had been taking a greater toll on her dementia than anyone had realized. With the truth revealed and family tensions reduced, her cognitive clarity improved noticeably. During one of our evening conversations, Mom made an observation that helped me understand the broader impact of standing up for myself. "You know, sweetheart, watching you claim your power has reminded me that I gave up too much of mine over the years. I spent so much time managing other people's feelings that I forgot about honoring my own truth. This led to deeper conversations about women in our family and the patterns of self-sacrifice that had been passed down through generations. My grandmother's decision to secure my inheritance was not just about money or property, it was about breaking a cycle of female powerlessness that she had recognized and consciously interrupted. I also gained a new appreciation for the concept of chosen family. While blood relationships had disappointed me, I found myself surrounded by friends, colleagues, and extended family members who celebrated my success rather than resenting it. These were people who wanted me to thrive rather than diminish myself to make others comfortable. My dating life improved dramatically once I stopped accepting treatment that mirrored my family dynamics. I began recognizing earlier when romantic partners tried to minimize my achievements or make me feel guilty for my success. The confidence that came from owning my own home and running a successful business attracted healthier relationships with people who appreciated my strength rather than feeling threatened by it. The house itself became a symbol of transformation rather than obligation. I renovated spaces to reflect my personal style instead of maintaining everything exactly as my parents had left it. The property felt truly mine for the first time, and I took pride in making improvements and hosting gatherings for friends who appreciated the space. Looking back on that Christmas dinner, I realized that revealing the property deed was not really about humiliating Marcus or proving him wrong. It was about reclaiming my right to exist fully in my own life without apology or explanation. For too many years, I had accepted a narrative that positioned me as grateful recipient rather than rightful owner of my own circumstances. The most valuable lesson I learned was that sometimes the people who love us most can still be the ones who limit us most effectively. My parents' desire to protect family harmony had resulted in years of me accepting diminished status and Marcus developing an inflated sense of entitlement. True love sometimes requires difficult conversations and uncomfortable truths. Now, when I tell this story to friends, they often ask if I regret the way I handled the situation or if I wish I had been gentler with Marcus's ego. My answer is always the same. Kindness should not require me to participate in my own diminishment. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their delusions about power and privilege. Have you ever had to choose between keeping family peace and standing up for your own truth? I would love to hear your stories about family dynamics, inheritance drama, or moments when you had to assert your worth against people who wanted all you to stay small. Drop a comment below sharing your own experiences with family karma. And go. Did justice eventually find its way to your situation too? If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life tales of people who refuse to accept less than they deserved. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply telling the truth about who holds the real power in family relationships. Thank you for joining me on this journey of family revelation and personal empowerment. Remember that your worth is not determined by other people's comfort with your success, and sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to stop apologizing for taking up space in your own life.